Amazon's Fallout is one of the best video game adaptations to have ever been created. It has clever dialogue, a thrilling story with multiple engaging subplots, beautiful cinematography, and some standout performances from a stellar cast. The show is already good enough to stand on its own without the Fallout IP, but as a fan of the games, it's a treat to watch and see all the references and Easter eggs to such an iconic franchise. And I don't think it would reach this level of success if not for Riot's Arcane. Let me explain. Arcane showed the world that video game adaptations can be good. Before the show's release, good video game adaptations were few and far between, and none saw the mainstream success that Arcane did. Want some examples? The Warcraft movie was supposed to be the film that paved the way for good video game media, as it was based on the most popular MMO of all time. It ended up being mid and incredibly forgettable. The Witcher show started off promising with a pretty interesting season 1, but then it fell off hard once the showrunners revealed their true colors and Henry Cavill walked out. What about Detective Pikachu, a movie featuring the most popular media franchise of all time? Nope, it's a like it or hate it film. I'm personally okay with it though. Even the Dota anime performed rather disappointingly. Dota fans loved it, but it flew under the radar for just about everyone else. Yeah, it ran for 3 seasons on Netflix, but nobody really talks about it anymore. I like the show personally, but I only watch it because I already play Dota. Castlevania was loved by critics and fans and had a real shot at becoming a mainstream hit, but it just didn't catch on with general audiences. Then you get to the largely forgettable piles of mid at best films that the 90s and early 2000s put out, like the old Mortal Kombat films, the Prince of Persia movie, Tomb Raider, etc. Then Riot said, "Hold my beer," and blew everyone away with an amazing story, breathtaking visuals and animation, stellar voice work, and a spectacular show all around. It was only after Arcane's release that the actually good video game shows and movies started to come out. The Last of Us live action show being the big one, though for a zombie show, it admittedly didn't have that many zombies. The Super Mario movie was a lot of fun, even if the story beats were admittedly predictable. Chris Pratt was surprisingly decent as Mario, but the real reason to watch is Keegan-Michael Key as Toad and Jack Black as Bowser. Heck, even the Sonic the Hedgehog sequel turned out to be worth checking out. Before Arcane came out, most people's experience with video game movies and shows would be that they're meant for kids, or that they're likely to flop and not worth checking out, or that it's impossible to tell a mature story based on a video game and have it be a hit with a general audience. Arcane changed the narrative about video game adaptations as a whole, showing Hollywood execs that if you do it right, they can be successful. Second, Arcane created the formula for a good video game adaptation that Fallout followed. Before Arcane's release, showrunners had no clue on how to create a successful video game movie because there was just no good example. There was always the question of, what story do we tell? Do showrunners just adapt the same story from the video game into movie or television form with little to no changes? But then, if they did that, there would just be no reason for people who have already played the games to come watch the movies or shows because they already know what's going to happen. But then if you try to tell an original story with original characters, how do you make it feel like you're actually making the most out of the IP? I mean, if you're a big studio and paid to use the name of the franchise, shouldn't you also want to feature the biggest characters in said franchise? The Last of Us didn't have this problem though, because the story is Joel and Ellie. It's about their journey, relationship, and growth, and seeing how these two characters learn to care for one another. People are going to want to watch this story play out, especially with the big name actors attached. The story is so timeless that people are going to watch it over and over again, which is why Naughty Dog is milking it like the cash cow it is. But Fallout isn't a game that has a singular core story to adapt. In fact, it's the opposite. The Fallout series is known for having multiple branching paths of stories that unfold based on the choices that the player makes. So unlike The Last of Us, where everyone who plays the game will see the exact same story unfold as everyone else, everyone's Fallout playthrough will be completely unique as the outcome of the story is based on their own individual choices. And when you think about it, it's kind of the same as League of Legends in this regard. There are a million different ways that a single league match can unfold based on the choices that each individual player chooses. Which is why Arcane's choice to follow multiple protagonists and watch their growth over the course of the show was genius. I said in a previous video that Jinx is the main character, and I still think that's true, but we also get to see how Jace and Vi both have a role to play in the greater story of Arcane, and how their choices impact the universe as a whole. And then you get to see their personalities and ideologies clash, contradict, and challenge each other. Funnily enough, it's like the show represents a league match in this regard, where you'll be faced against or aligned with people who may not think the same way, but you'll have to make do. Through using multiple protagonists, Arcane showrunners showed people how to adapt a video game with multiple branching choices that affect the outcome of a story. And by using multiple characters with different ideals, you're also representing the different players who would be playing your game. And Fallout followed that exact formula. Like Arcane, Fallout features multiple protagonists, focusing primarily on 3 different points of view. But unlike Arcane, these characters were made specifically for the show instead of using pre-existing characters in the canon. And this works because you don't play as a champion that Riot developed, you play as a character of your own creation. We have Lucy, the goody-two-shoes character who tries her best to make the surface world a better place, even if it literally tries to kill her on multiple occasions. Maximus, the selfish Brotherhood of Steel soldier who's only really playing to get himself ahead, and the Ghoul, the murder hobo who kills and fights for the hell of it. I also want to mention Norm, who functions a bit like Echo in Arcane, as a side character but kind of a main character who, like Echo, has one of the most interesting subplots in the show. Throughout the course of the show, we see these characters and their personalities connect, clash, and counteract. Seeing these characters force each other to confront their weaknesses and the consequences of their own choices really makes you feel like you're playing a Fallout game. Personally, my favorite character is Lucy because I choose to play through most RPGs as a stereotypical good guy, and I could never bring myself to make evil choices without reloading the save. And speaking of Lucy, that brings me to my next point. Fallout showrunners really saw Arcane's success and decided to bring in one of the people that made it happen. That's right, the face of the Fallout show is portrayed by none other than Ella Purnell, better known to Arcane fans as the voice of Jinx. While she did have a number of roles in a bunch of smaller shows and movies, Arcane flung this lady into mainstream success, and as much as I love her character and work, I don't even think she's the best actor or actress on the show. That title belongs to Walton Goggins as the Ghoul. Absolutely amazing work as his character, and I just love every single minute of him on screen. And that just shows what it takes to make a successful video game show. You can have no-name actors, but you need 1 or 2 big or popular names to help get people to watch. Remember, Arcane didn't exactly have Marvel movie levels of casting power, but the show did have one big name attached. Haley Steinfeld as Vi, coming off hot from her role as Gwen Stacy in the widely successful Into the Spider-Verse, and that was more than enough to get members of a general audience watching. The Last of Us also did the same, casting the charming Pedro Pascal as Joel and the rising Bella Ramsey as Ellie, and this casting had to be perfect because of the nature of the story. Also, Nick Offerman, who killed it in that one episode, and, well, you also get the entire Mario movie cast. And Fallout is following suit, with Ella Purnell, fresh off her amazing performance in Arcane, and Walton Goggins with his long career, but also recently getting some love as Cecil Stedman in Invincible, which is also on Amazon and is also very much worth watching. But there's one final piece that Arcane had that every successful video game adaptation took note of and followed, and that's loyalty to and respect for the source material. Even after Arcane's success, there are shows based on video games that ended up flopping. Of course, I'm talking about The Witcher, which I know is actually based on the books, but it's too good of an example to not use, and Halo. The reason that these shows flopped and ended up being hated by the very fans of the franchises that they were adapting was because their showrunners simply didn't pay attention to the source material. The Witcher XX famously hated on the books, and Henry Cavill, the lead actor of the show, had to step in and make a few changes and pretty much say that Geralt of Rivia wouldn't do this for certain scenes. He was the biggest name attached on the show, and he eventually walked out on it due to the showrunner's questionable creative decisions. And the Halo XX never played the games. They blatantly ignored the very source material for the show that they're supposed to be adapting. No wonder it also flopped. Arcane and Fallout don't just respect the lore of the games, but add to it. Arcane gave us real glimpses of Piltover and Zaun, 2 locations in Runeterra lore that are only really talked about through in-game quips between champions and through lore tidbits. We got to see Powder's descent into Jinx, and why she has the relationship she does with Vi and Caitlyn. We get to see the backstories of each character featured in the show, and how they were before becoming the champions we all know and love. Fallout took this idea of expanding the lore as well as showing us some never before seen locations, such as Vaults 31, 32, and 33. They also give us glimpses of what life for a certain character was like before the war. Doing justice to the source material and adding to them not only appeases the pre-existing fans of the universe, but also gives them a reason to view the show. But the Fallout showrunners took expanding the lore a step further by answering a question that fans of the franchise have been speculating for decades. They drop perhaps the biggest bomb, pun intended, when it comes to the Fallout universe lore. If you want to find out what it is, you just have to watch the show. As a fan of both the Fallout games and League of Legends, it was really interesting to see how these two shows, which on the surface have nothing in common, relate to each other. I'm just glad that Arcane was able to create a really strong example for how to do a video game adaptation correctly, and I can't wait to see how this formula is improved upon further in the future. Bethesda Elder Scrolls show win. My only hope is that the Hollywood showrunners who are in charge of making these shows learn from Arcane, Last of Us, and Fallout, and the other shows and movies that I talked about in this video to create even better adaptations of our favorite games and bring them to a general audience. The fact that we're getting a season 2 for both of these shows means that we're eating good in the years to come. And speaking of better content, if you liked the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. While this video tackles a different subject matter from what I'm normally up to, I just love talking about video games as a whole and can't wait to create even better video essays in the future. If you already follow me for my League and Dota content, don't worry, there's more to come. I just felt like making this video after binging the Fallout show for 2 days in a row and pointing out the similarities. Let me know what you think of this kind of content and if you'd like to see more in the comments. And with that, thank you and ace out.